3D printing invalidates gun control. And I want to talk about what I mean by that, just to be more specific, and to help kind of identify and make that connection clear. So with 3D printing firearms, right, we're talking about you being able to buy a 3D printer for a couple $100. Of course, you can always go nicer. We're talking about you being able to have that in your own house and then manufacture receivers for firearms and other firearms parts. Combine this with the proliferation of materials such as metal pipes, such as barrels, such as trigger kits and things like that. Combine this with other basic machining, and you can create whatever it is that you want. At the end of the day, that means that anyone, regardless of their criminal history, regardless of how the government's adjudicated their mental health, regardless of whatever. Anybody that has access to this technology or knows someone that does and wants to pay him under the table will have a firearm. That pretty much will defeat the purpose of most possession laws with firearms. That will also defeat the purpose of any of the background check or mental health screening laws. And that will ultimately enable anyone to have a firearm if they really want it. Once the files are on the internet, you can't just take them down. There's no magic wand to remove data from the internet. The state of the world right now is that just about anyone in the U.S. Can do this, and we're seeing this happen in Europe as well. Of course, I'm more versed in the U.S. Laws, so Prince Charles, I'll be counting on you to educate me on how you see things over in your neck of the woods.
But if you need anything explaining about European firearms law,
just assume that because I'm an American, I'm ignorant, you know. But yeah,
I will say, I hate to interrupt, but you're saying the proliferation of pipes. It just gives me some like Southern governor saying, "I think we need to stop the proliferation of these pipes that people are selling down there."
Right.
Sorry.
It's you know, it's the same problem with paraphernalia for anything. Any controlled substance paraphernalia. Well, if the people can make it themselves, right? Like as is the case with marijuana, then you know it's going to get out there into the public, and it's going to ultimately invalidate the law. And now, when I say invalidate the law, in these cases, gun control measures, I'm saying, hey, look, like these are no longer going to be effective. Like they're not going to be as effective. I think it's obvious, and I'll happily see this out the gate. If you prevented, say, if you blocked all firearms purchases tomorrow, like you made buying firearms illegal, there would be less firearms that enter the population over time, right? I don't think that would be. I don't think it's reasonable to contend that if you removed the sources of the supply, right, that magically that supply will somehow get there if you prevent that supply from being purchased. So
not everyone wants the 3D print gun.
Yeah, so and I'm happy to see that out the gate. More or less, what I mean though is that the gun control measures, specifically what they're trying to do, how they function, and everything, that in and of itself is what's invalidated by 3D printing. Because hey, guess what? You don't need those approvals. No one's going to be able to sit there and check what you're doing in your basement or in your garage or in your attic or whatever. There's people that have 3D printers going off in their bedrooms printing lower receivers right now. They can just kind of do whatever they want. So more or less that's kind of what I'm just going for with this, and I think I've taken plenty of time. So
well, just a rebuttal to your point, I think that firearms laws would not be invalidated simply because I can print off a lower receiver for an AR-15 at home, but I would still need the upper. I'd still need the barrel, the magazine, the bullets to go with it. I mean, 3D printing technology can only come so far, and I'll say, granted, you could make bullets out of fertilizer these days, but you'd still need all of the other components that go with it. And frankly, I think that a really big thing is, you have a 3D printed gun, which I think the pistol it looks almost like a bolter out of Warhammer 40,000. It's literally got a detachable mag like an AR. But how dangerous is that? Granted, still a gun, still dangerous. But how dangerous is that compared to a custom-built rifle, a purpose-built firearm that was designed from the ground up, say the AR-15, which came from the US Army trials for the new assault rifle. I'm not going to harp on about the NAR is an assault rifle. God knows I'm not going to go on that one. But the point is still that there's a purpose-built item specifically designed to be reliable, usable, and fairly inexpensively to kill something, or target shooting, granted. But it's designed from the ground up to be a weapon of war, mainly. And I wonder, controlling that, and again, in the US, there are $200 tax stamps for fully automatic weapons. So are you saying that 3D printing just automatically invalidates any kind of control that we have over, fully automatic weapons?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. But
yeah, I would contend that. Absolutely. In the US especially. I mean, speaking for where it's more restrictive in, like, say, Europe, there may be some exceptions to that, but for AR-15s, absolutely, completely invalidates the NFA.
Yeah, fair point. But see, it's really hard for me to argue because I really agree with that point. But no, what I think is, especially coming from a European perspective, where firearms are heavily regulated. So over here, anything that isn't rimfire, for those of you that don't know, the firing pin hits the side of the bullet instead of the middle to make it shoot. Anything that doesn't do that, you have to have bolt action or lever action, pump action, something like that, non-repeating. Anything that is rimfire can be a repeating rifle, but only a semi-automatic. Shotguns, nobody really cares. I mean, I think I've said I've got a Saiga 12. So shotguns are much less seen as weapons over here because, again, we have a very big community of target shooting, clay pigeon shooting, grouse shooting, things like that. But over here, that's heavily regulated, and even with the proliferation of 3D printing technology, they're still regulated heavily because those are custom-made rifles. I'm saying that like they're not custom-made, but you know what I mean, purpose-made rifles. They're manufactured with a company that has all of the grounds to build these rifles from the ground up. You know what you're getting. I said I've got shotguns. I buy them from Baikal. I know that I'm going to get a shotgun that shoots reliably every time. If I 3D print a gun or I make one, granted, slam fire probably a little bit different, but at the same time, we've always had slam fire guns. To say that it invalidates gun control would almost be like saying, well, I have a pipe and this small pin here, so all gun control is automatically invalid because I can shove a slug down there, hit it with a hammer, and it will go off and kill somebody. But we don't, because we know that the guns that are made to be guns from the ground up are much more dangerous than something that Jeb can knock up in his shed with a 3D printer, because at the same time, he's still going to need the bullets, and he's still going to need most of the other components that go with that gun. Granted, if he's got a hammer forge or something like that, he could probably machine it himself. But, how many people are reasonably going to go out and think, oh, hey, I have a 3D printer. I will 3D print a gun which breaks the law, and I will have an unregistered firearm. Because I think that the only target sector that's going to do that is either gun nuts or criminals. And criminals are going to get the guns anyway. So realistically, gun control measures would still work because your average civilian on the street who has a firearm isn't going to go home and think, boy, I think I'll 3D print something that will break several laws and could land me in a lot of trouble. I don't think that they're invalidated simply for the fact that somebody could make a weapon at home, because people have always been able to make weapons at home. So there's nothing new realistically that's happened. It's just slightly easier. I'll stress that, slightly easier, because even 3D printing a gun, it is still quite difficult to make it.
Yeah, I don't think that we should be so quick to dismiss the reliability of 3D printed lower receivers for like AR-15s, rather like rifle cartridges and things like that. Absolutely, you could in theory use the wrong polymer, have shoddy construction and injure yourself. On the other hand, you can also just follow better procedures. You can use more durable polymer, and polymer lowers are already a really popular thing in the AR-15 market anyway. That's something that's here. As far as like and when we're looking at European laws and everything, this is some place where I have a question. I can agree, let's say, that it doesn't invalidate all gun control. Like, I think you and I are on the same page with that. Like,
Yeah.
On not invalidating all, but I do think that it makes it really quick and easy. It reduces the amount of know-how you need, because you need to know how to turn on a 3D printer, how to feed it, how to run it, and then you need to know where to download your plans from and how to clean it up and whatever. And that's much easier than trying to, get a block of metal and carve it out yourself or CNC it, right? Like, and even that process is getting easier. I'm excluding that for the purposes of debate, but
If I could just interject quickly.
Go ahead.
I wouldn't actually say that, it's very difficult to build a gun, because I mean, right now I can literally just go and Google. I'm sorry to everybody who doesn't know about it, but Walt, I am sure that you will know of the book that literally contains detailed specifications for making everything from a pistol to an SMG. Yeah, that book. That's been around since like the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
some great recipes, I hear.
Apparently, they're very, very good. Not that I would know, but
Yeah, I think we can. I think it's okay to say the name of the book here. I don't think.
I can't remember the name. I can't remember the name of the book.
Are you referring to the Anarchist Cookbook?
No.
Okay.
No.
Gosh, I'm trying to think.
Quickly try and find it now. I know I've got it.
No worries. I mean, I know, like, the Anarchist Cookbook is one that people get really sensitive about saying online, but it's also in like the Library of Congress, if I'm not mistaken. So it's something you can check out. So it's like, well, if the government's saying you can read it, then you can.
I do find it slightly ironical of the things that are in national libraries, but
right.
Anyway, on back on topic. Those books are things that exist, and there's not just the Anarchist Cookbook. There are a great many that have recipes for, like I said, literally semi-automatic pistols, revolvers, submachine guns that work very reliably. I think there are even a few for semi-automatic and fully automatic rifles and battle rifles. So, I'd say that 3D printing technology makes it easier. No, it just expedites the process. It's still remarkably easy to make your own firearm. It's just that 3D printing technology makes it slightly faster. And I say slightly faster as though it's instant, but bloody hell, God knows a 3D printer takes 3.5 hours to make a mini Eiffel Tower. But
yeah,
it just expedites the process and makes it much quicker. But easier, I disagree on that one, because it is still fairly easy to make a gun effectively in a shed with nothing more than a hammer, a hacksaw, and if you're really, really lucky, maybe a drill.
I think it's almost I like, being a philosophy major, I don't want to just downplay something as semantics, but I kind of do right now. Like, I think we're kind of dancing around the same thing with just different words.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think when I say easy, I'm referring to like maybe accessibility, in that certain parts are now just available to you at your home that you can just make on your own. In the case of like the AR-15, for instance, it would be relatively simple and straightforward to convert most AR-15s that are not currently in a semi-automatic configuration into a semi-automatic configuration, right? You would typically probably like here in the U.S., one thing that's popular for people to do is for if they needed it in a quote unquote bolt action configuration, is just to swap which way the gas block at the end of the gas tube, right, that's mounted on the barrel, just swap that around so that the gas can exit, and then that allows the self-loading functions to resume, right? I'm
pretty sure it's literally just milling one thing.
Right. Yeah.
It changes it.
Yeah, so if you have the requisite parts for that, you can do that, and in theory, you could have that. Now, depending on your bolt carrier group, and if you're willing to drill additional holes anywhere, you could 3D print an auto sear tomorrow. You have a piece of polymer, you can throw that in the back, and congratulations, you have full auto, and you can take it out and throw it in a fire, and no one would know.
Mm.
So like, you know, there's a lot there, as far as just like, yeah, this, you know, and like the auto sear, if we're talking about that, can be polymer and can be pretty small, gonna fit and be about like gosh, even, not even an inch, a very small 3D printed part. You could literally print out, you know,
Mm.
hundreds of these probably a day, just as far as the size, and just given a compatible bolt, yeah, you can completely skirt around, say, full auto law. So in that sense, yeah, like how are you going to enforce that? Well, in a day and age with like bump fire as well, you know, if you wanted to create 3D print a bump fire stock, if you wanted to, you know, like there's a
Yeah,
lot of options available to you. So, right. So that's more or less like, hey, look, like, you know, there's so many ways to circumvent the law, and democratizing the innovation to different designers out there, to
yeah,
where people can just build whatever they want in their homes. Well, then who's to say? Like, who's to say that, yeah, the law can be properly followed, or will be properly followed in those instances? We're literally giving people the tools for non-compliance with the law.
mm,
And I mean, and here in my libertarian wonder world, I think, you know, I think it's a great thing that people have access to that and can do it. And I say, just because I'm on YouTube, you know, don't break the law, but it
yeah.
also is abundantly easy to break the law if someone wants to. And if they do, that's their business as far as I'm concerned.
Well,
So
I
not
believe there
business,
is
but
one that's yeah, but I believe there is one that's called the FGC 9, which
Mhm.
pardon my French, everybody on YouTube and whatnot, but that stands for Fuck Gun Control 9mm rifle. And it is a 3D printed, fully made at home rifle that uses nothing that you can't get over the counter without any kind of licensing, which fires 3mm. But I will say that even with that, my question is, I'm not entirely certain how you can say it would invalidate gun control when, you know, granted, we don't know who's going to go out and do it, but not everybody will go out and do it. And I don't think that there has actually been any major shootings from people who were killed with 3D printed guns. You'll have to correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but nothing that I have heard
it's
of.
it's not super common, right? Like people, when people are acquiring firearms, right? Typically these firearms were purchased before. Like 3D printing is a let's say like in the course of history, it's been a relatively new thing, right? And
Yeah,
with the technology adoption, you always have like, you know, the initial like early investors, and you have that bell curve kind of go up into like the early adopters, right? And you have that bell curve kind of go up
mm,
as it becomes more and more mainstream. And I think that's where we're starting to go.
yeah,
Um, I think that there's going to be a day where most American homes have a 3D printer because it's convenient to make your own stuff.
yeah, yeah.
And so when we get to that point, yeah, if you just happen to, you know, 3D print the firearm, you know, right? Your friend needs to borrow a gun, you say, sure. You know, the government has no way of tracking that. If someone was going to buy a firearm through a quote unquote legitimate channel, such as like an FFL, which is
Mm,
a licensed firearms dealer right here in America,
yeah,
if someone's going to buy that, they're going to get a background check. In states like mine, California, not only do I have a background check, but I also have to wait 10 days, right, as a cool off period.
yeah.
There is none of that with the 3D printed firearm, and it would be quicker for me to actually acquire that on the street than it would be to acquire a standard firearm if I wasn't worried about following the law with what I had.
Mm,
The government will also say in California, oh, well, if you're going to 3D print a firearm, you know, you have to register it. Well, how are they going to know that I 3D printed a firearm, right? Like, how are they going to know that I constructed this thing in the first place?
mm,
They have no evidence of that. I can 3D print a Glock if I want. I could 3D print an AR-15 lower receiver, order all of my parts online. They have no way of tracking that, you know, functionally. I can go to a firearms dealership and pay cash for an upper receiver, right? And they have no way of tracking that.
mm,
I can build my own upper receiver out of just whatever spare parts I already have pre-existing, right? I can assemble new guns out of current guns that I have. There's a
mm,
lot of options for me here, and so that's just to build those. That's let alone, yeah. Now the government is supposedly going to have some kind of way to register and track these. Like, no, they won't. And so when the government, you know, says, "Oh, well, we found 21 ghost guns this year," because that's what they like to call them, is ghost guns, right?
yeah.
Because it's the untraceable firearm. Well, you found 21 ghost guns. Meanwhile, how many of them are out there? The year was 2020. People couldn't buy the firearms that they wanted for the longest time because there was such demand on them, given a rise in political instability, rises in hate crimes, rises in across the board. Just in the U.S., people said I wanted to be able to defend myself. So if I need to just go make my own gun, I do. And then we get people like Control Pew, Defense Distributed, right? All these other organizations that are really pushing the home manufacture, and that's out there. So in my state, for sure, I can say like without a doubt that yeah, your ability to 3D print completely invalidates anything the government's going to do to try to prevent, as far as the 10-day waiting period laws, the background check laws, the handgun roster, which exists in California, because you're only allowed to purchase certain handguns. Well, now if I can make my own, it doesn't matter, right? I'm circumventing that entirely. And then I'm supposed to register it. Well, they have no way of tracking, so too bad, you know. And then we see criminals use these too sometimes, right? And criminals can use them for exactly these reasons. They don't have to go to a store and buy them. They don't have to orchestrate straw purchases anymore, where someone with a clean background buys the gun for them, and then they steal it from that person, right? They don't have to organize these big crazy things. They can just go and make their own. Again, what's the point? Like,
I mean, you say that, but I think a big thing is there aren't many people who are really just gonna go and say, "Yep, screw everything. I'm not waiting. I want a gun and I want it now." I don't know many people personally, from around the globe really, who would try and circumvent the law that much just because they want a gun now or they want a gun that can't be traced. I think a lot of people, especially the kind of people who, are generally against firearms law, firearms owners, because most firearms owners are reasonable people. But why would firearms owners decide specifically, even though we want less strict firearms laws, I'm going to go and 3D print my own gun because, I don't have enough already, or I don't have any of the things that there is no real legitimate reason for me to see as to why somebody would print their own gun. And on top of that, like I've said, there are guns that are already in circulation. So to say that it invalidates that is quite ridiculous in my book, because, as I've said, there are fully automatic, semi-automatic weapons that can hold hundreds of rounds. I mean, you've got belt-fed guns, drum mags, things like that. Granted, you can 3D print those, but at the same time, these are things that have been built by a company specifically for their purpose. They are, I will say, with the case of drum mags, let's just leave it at semi, but the rest of them fairly reliably. Guns that are made in a factory are all built for purpose. You know that they're reasonably reliable, calicos granted, but most things that are built that way are going to be at least decently reliable. Whereas a 3D printed gun, granted, not traceable, nobody knows you've got it, but you still need the ammo for it. And you still need some parts that you just cannot get over the counter, except in the case of what do you call it, schematics, wherein, sure, you can make that at home. But, I mean, let's face it, how many people in all good reality are going to think, right, I want this 9mm rifle, and I was just reading up on it now. In order to make it, you have to use, electrochemical machining, which etches the steel barrel in order to give you rifling. How many people are going to think, I don't want like an AR-15 or a G36 if you can get those in the States. I don't want any of that. No, I'm going to take this small piece of plastic and this steel barrel. I'm going to do it all myself, and I'll have my gun. Because I really do not think that many people would rather have, the FGC-9 compared to something like an FAL or an AR or any other kind of gun. I mean, even with the pistol, granted, it's untraceable, it's made of plastic, so you can, granted without bullets, but you could probably get this in another way, sneak it through a metal detector. Yes, that's there, but Would you rather have this great clunky block of a gun, or would you rather have a Beretta FC9, which is reliable, holds more rounds, better built, and will last longer than any kind of 3D printed firearm out there? You know, these are things that need to be controlled and registered, because in my mind, you know, a Browning 50 cal or a PKM, they're much, much, much more dangerous, and will be for at least the next few decades, much more dangerous than any kind of 3D printed firearm that there is. An AR-15, you say, oh, you can make polymer lowers, but I think the US military recently just adopted polymer lowers. Almost every AR has a polymer lower. It's nothing new. And the lower isn't the important part, it's the upper that is where the bullets come out of. I mean, I can buy an AR lower. It doesn't really matter because it's literally just the trigger mechanism and the bit that the magazine goes up in. Whereas, you know, if you were saying to me people can 3D print AR uppers, then yeah, I'd be very worried because that would be a legitimate concern. But just to say that it invalidates gun control because people can doesn't really make much sense, because 3D printing hasn't enabled people to do anything, because as we've previously discussed, people have always been able to make guns. I mean, I'm pretty sure since the advent of firearms, people have been able to make guns at home that are completely untraceable. I mean, let's take a look at the, what was it, 50 caliber rifle that somebody now mass manufactures in an actual weapons workshop, which they made in a shed using pipes. And I think it cost something like $100, $150, because that's literally all it is. It is galvanized piping that fires a 50 caliber bullet. But, you know, you've got an anti-materiel rifle that you can make in a shed there, and he didn't really use, as far as I'm aware, many tools. It's literally just a hammer, a tube, and a trigger mechanism, and you don't even need the trigger. So 3D printed guns, yeah, granted, they're quite scary and their ease of use is a little bit frightening. But to say that that just invalidates all gun control measures is a little bit fanciful, really, because there are still a lot of guns out there, and a lot of guns that are infinitely more dangerous than a 3D printed 9mm rifle that's semi-automatic. You know, if you're saying to me, oh, who would you rather go up against? You know, a guy with a semi-automatic 9mm rifle, or a guy with a PKM with a box mag that holds 250 rounds in 7.62, I believe. I'd probably go with the guy with the 9mm pistol, because as far as that is, it's 9mm. I can get behind cover. He's not going to destroy it. That PKM, that's going to shred concrete. Granted, not quickly, but that's going to go through eventually. And
yeah, there's a lot to respond to. I don't want to interrupt. It's just you've given me a lot to respond to.
No, sorry, I kind of went off on that.
No worries, no worries. Yeah, I just wanted to go back to one point here. It seems like I want to make clear that I'm not advocating all gun control measures, because you and I agree it doesn't invalidate every gun control measure, but my point is just that it invalidates many of them. Several gun control measures I think it invalidates. So when I was talking about, like, say in California, you know, they have registration requirements. Well, the ability for me to just make this on my own, because all handguns in California are supposed to be serialized, you know, well, the fact that I make it on my own, that's no longer a thing, and that's being made more accessible through 3D printing. And so that's more or less the type of thing that I would do. Like, I would grant that hypothetically, if somehow you could ban every single form of metallurgy, you know, like every single type of way of melting things down to make either shell casings, to make bullets. If you could mitigate any homemade powder, somehow you can mitigate every propellant or starter that could be used. And then, yeah, like, in order to really have effective gun control that could ban 100% of the guns, not only would you need to get a magic magnet to suck all the existing guns into the sky, but then you would need to be like supervising people when they go to, you know, the Home Depot to buy pipes and nails, right? So that's all fine. My point is, hey, look, we have these systems now where if you want to go out tomorrow and start 3D printing parts for a Scorpion Evo, or for a Vector, or for an AR-15, and you want to get so far as to have your handrails, your stocks, your grips, your lower receiver, your even your upper receiver, just minus the barrel, which is a piece of pipe. And by the way, this was what I also wanted to say. The note on etching for rifling.
Yeah.
While that's good for long-term stability of the projectile and I believe speed of the projectile, in overwhelming cases, we see those impacts happen. Completely not mandatory to get a projectile out the other end of that barrel. And with some degree of accuracy at ranges where we're going to see self-defense encounters. So, yeah, is it going to be the same as, like if I had an AR-15 without rifling in the barrel, would I be trusting that at 300, 400, 500 yards when compared to one with rifling? Like, no, right? But if I was shooting at something 15 yards away or 20 yards away or 25 yards away, could I probably hit it? Yeah, like that's not going to be so different. So like, yeah, while the weapons made by manufacturers, if we were talking about truly doing homemade start to finish, yeah, the weapons manufacturing companies like Smith and Wesson or Glock or Armalite or whatever are going to be really, really good compared to what you can probably turn out in your home. But what you can turn out in your home is probably going to be good enough to get you through a self-defense encounter, good enough for you to commit a crime with if you wanted, good enough for you to go have a little bit of fun at the range with if you wanted, whatever your purpose was, ethical or otherwise, right? So that's more or less my point with that. But that was all I wanted to get out there. We can go on.
I'm trying to think now. Well, I'd say that in response, I would say that, yeah, rifling's not necessary. There are a lot of things in that aren't necessary, really. But, the fact that you can 3D print a gun at home, and yes, it can be used for, whatever nefarious things that you want, doesn't have to have stability in it. I still don't think that somebody who just wants a gun for self-defense is, really going to say, oh, I'd rather not go to the gun store, wait the 10 days minimum, have a background check performed on me. I just don't think that for most people the hassle would be worth it rather than, just buying literally anything at high point of 5.7 and they have it there in their home within 10 days. They can, go and protect themselves and their family with that. Whereas with a 3D printed gun, I think there's almost an onus there as to, you want a 3D printed gun, then you're going to have to want to break the law in some degree, granted, whether that's because you disagree with it, whether that's because, in your area, guns are so highly regulated that they're not allowed, granted. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I do think that, most reasonable people would rather just wait rather than spend the time and the energy 3D printing a gun, which would, anyone finds out you've got it, you've broken the law. If you defend yourself with it, you've broken the law. Let's say you do defend yourself with it because that's why you want it. Okay, great. I've defended myself with it. The police arrive. There's a guy shot there. They do a background check on you. You're not a registered firearms owner. So, how did you get shot? Oh, I have this 3D printed gun. Right, that's a felony. You're going away. To me, if you wanted to defend yourself, you would go the legal route, because if you don't, it doesn't matter what you do, you're still alive, but you're in the slammer for 8 to 10 years. So, why would you do that? To me, it's invariably only really going to be criminal types who use it, and even then, I don't think a criminal, unless he's a lone wolf, sort of like the Vegas shooter, I don't think that he's going to go for it, because criminals can already get guns in the UK, even though firearms are so heavily regulated here. We don't really have shootings, but when we do, it's an unregistered gun that a criminal got, probably invariably in London. Don't go there, it's horrible. And, people in the UK say, oh, well, we have such strict firearms laws, but they don't do anything because the guns that the criminals are getting are already in the country, already unregistered, and nobody knows where they are or how many of them there are in the country. So to say that 3D printing invalidates gun control doesn't make any sense to me personally, because even with the few laws that wouldn't really make sense in a world with proliferation of 3D printing technology and firearms, they would still make sense, because I highly doubt personally that most people are actually even going to want them, whether they're law-abiding citizens or criminals, because they can already get pre-manufactured guns that they don't have to make, that they don't have to worry about getting in trouble for, because that's legal to have that. Criminals aren't going to want them because they've already got the supply chains in place. I mean, I assume that you've also been on the dark web, and you can buy I think it's a Desert Eagle for about $500, and that's illegal, untraceable, semi-automatic pistol, and that's in 50 AE, which is a stupid caliber, but you can still have that. You shoot somebody with that, that's going to leave like a golf ball sized hole in their face.
I want to know where to get a $500 Desert Eagle. I like there's a whole thing in California with how to procure one and then transition it to 50 AE legally, quote unquote, and
you
it's
can get
a whole process.
non-50 AE Desert Eagles in California.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Well, I mean, like illegal. Like, if you were to buy it in 50 AE, that would be, I think, illegal. But if you had bought it in 44 Magnum and transitioned it, I think that might be legal. So,
I've only ever seen one once, but.
Yeah, but that notwithstanding, I think the example of London, let's say unregistered guns being used by criminals, kind of proves the point, like that the gun control is functionally invalidated by additional tools that continue to produce unregistered firearms that they can't track. It's literally like, hey, look. Gun control. No amount of gun control you're throwing at this problem is going to address that aspect of that problem.
If I could just interject
go ahead,
because I do have a come up for that. This is a UK-based analogy, so granted, nothing like this has really happened in America, but actually, thinking about it, the bump stock ban, yeah, that was similar, but didn't really help. In this country, we've had two, in my memory, or at least in living memory, we've had two major shootings in this country. The first was Dunblane school shooting, which is the only school shooting that's ever occurred in the UK. And that occurred because, unfortunately, a child who was being bullied stole his dad's pistol, snuck it into school, and just started shooting all of the kids that bullied him. After that incident, pistols in the UK were banned, unless, as I think I've shown you, they look absolutely ridiculous with like 20-inch barrels and extendos out the handle.
Right.
But ever since then, we've had no issues with pistols outside of the very, very, very rare instance. And I do have to stress rare. I think it's like 1, maybe 2 a year that we actually have in the UK where somebody gets shot with a pistol which is unregistered. But outside of that, those 2 incidents a year, it doesn't really happen anymore. It used to. But as soon as we banned pistols, it stopped. The second was shooting in Wixford, I believe, where a man used, an AKM, which, not my favourite AK, I'm sorry to say, but he used an AKM, a Ruger Mini 14, I believe, and a Beretta FC9. Only reason I'm remembering a pistol is because I guessed it right first time on the TV, and I was very proud of that fact. But he used those. He went on a mass shooting. I think he killed somewhere between 16 and 20 people. And after that, we banned semi-automatic rifles that weren't basically 22 long rifle or 17 Hornet. We just banned those completely. And ever since then, with the exception of one other mass shooting, which occurred sometime in 2013, 2015, I think, somewhere around there, we've never had a problem with major shootings because of that, with rifles as well. So, to say that it invalidates gun control, I highly disagree, at least from a UK-based perspective. Because it's like every time that we've had a major shooting, we banned the thing that caused it, and we've just not had a problem with them outside of pistols because, as I said, they're in unregistered circulation in London by criminal gangs. So you're not really going to solve much with legislation on that. But, for everything else, for us, at least here, it fixed the issue that came about because of it. So
What?
I would disagree.
What? Okay, yeah, and I think let's because you circled back to this point, and just in the interest of me being like the most like charitable listener that I can,
Yeah.
um, when I say invalidate, I feel like I may have a different conception of that than you. When you hear the words "this invalidates gun control" or "X invalidates gun control," what does invalidate mean to you in that instance?
That the law is
Like
no
when
longer
you
the purpose. The law is no longer valid because it doesn't do the job that it was set out to do.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So I think like let's use that definition here in America.
Hmm.
And when we look at some, yeah, there are some quote unquote like mass shootings. I prefer mass killings because I feel like mass killing has a bit more of a consistent definition here in America. But
Yeah.
we might hear someone say mass shootings are 3 people, 5 people, 4 people, whatever. Mass killings I think is standardized around I think 3 or more by the FBI. I could be mistaken on that. I'm sure someone will correct me later. But
Just to put it out there, for me, a mass shooting is more than 10. That's
okay.
how I tend to see it. Otherwise,
Yeah, that's
it's killing.
then if that was the definition, then you would be greatly elated at how few mass shootings happen in America when our media is reporting
It
on
is
them.
quite ridiculous
Yeah.
to me. I've spoken to somebody in the States, and he says, no, a lot of the times it is literally just either a double or triple murder that they call a mass shooting. It's like, oh,
Mhm.
brilliant.
Yeah,
Like,
and
oh,
and
we have that here.
right.
Ooh. It boggles my mind sometimes.
Yeah, but on the end of like say like hobbyists wanting to circumvent the law, 3D printing absolutely gives them the ability to do that. I can tell you from the amount of different fellow gun nuts, out there.
Yeah.
The volume of those who are willing to circumvent the law is quite high. Um, and that's just your average citizen in America. And the reason that they're so quick and so willing to abandon, the following the law is because they just see the law as inconvenient from them getting what they want. Like in
Huh.
my state with the featureless laws that California has, I can't use a normal pistol grip on an AR-15, despite that causing no change in how the firearm functions. It's literally more comfortable and more stable for me to use. Thus, it's safer for me to
Yeah.
use. And if I ever needed to use it defensively, that makes it safer for other people I'm using it around, that I have a better grip on the thing that they say is so dangerous. You wouldn't want me to have a weak grip on, you know?
In fairness, you say a lot of the people who would break the laws regarding this are gun nuts. Personally, I'm not
Yeah.
too afraid of that because I'd rather gun nuts have these illegal guns than anyone else because at least they know good trigger discipline. It's like, oh, I went to the range with a friend of mine who thought that he knew everything about guns because he played Call of Duty and just started flagging everyone. And it was like, no, stop.
Yeah. And that's where I think like the topic gets kind of like interesting, right? Is that like when we talk about, okay, well, the average person is going to 3D print a gun. Like, well, right now it's we're kind of seeing the proliferation of 3D printing rise, right? Just over time
Yeah.
as the technology continues.
Definitely say that we're just on the cusp of it rather than seeing its actual effects.
Yeah, so on that end, yeah, right now it is the diehard hobbyists for the most part that we see doing the 3D printing, getting involved and like, going into CAD and drawing up their plans and whatever, right? And
Yeah,
um
100%. Yeah.
so yeah, no debate there, but like yeah, 10 years when you can, go, turn on Windows and click a button and print your gun, print your, print whatever. Yeah, like and there's nothing anyone can do to stop you. Like when it gets to that point, and you like I guess like to make the law not matter anymore, why do background checks matter at that point? Why does the NFA matter if you could 3D print an auto sear today,
Mm.
and throw it into a compatible weapon system, right? So like like why would any of that matter? Or how would the law matter to that person who just says, nah, I can break it. There's no way to track it. There's no way to to prove that I did it. When I'm done with it, if someone's questioning me, I can drive over it with my car. I can, I can throw it in a fireplace and be done with it, right? I can dispose of it because it's a tiny piece of plastic. Like in that case, yeah, it absolutely invalidated like the NFA. And if the National Firearms Act isn't gun control here in America, like I wouldn't know what else could be considered gun control.
Mm. Well, I'd say it's got an interesting point, really, because, yeah, on the one hand, you could just destroy it and you're done with it. But then at the same time, that says that almost every other form of firearm isn't probably really going to be destroyed unless you throw it in a river or something, which, again, pardon me, sorry, I had a pot noodle on, a bit gassy. But, to say that invalidates gun control because, I could throw it in a river or I could burn it. Well, I could do that with any gun already. I mean, I know I'm harping on about a Beretta, but it's literally just a name that I can put on something. I take a Beretta, I've shot 3 men with it, I just throw it in a river. That's still gone. Granted, you could probably find it again, but that's still gone. And again, it's the point that I keep looping back to because I think it is a really important point to think on. 3D printing guns, whilst, yes, anyone can do it, yes, it's relatively quick, and I wouldn't say easy, but it's a lot less labor, should we say, than, making one out of, say, the Anarchist Cookbook. But at the same time, 3D printing hasn't actually brought anything new to the table at all. I think I've said it before, it just expedites the process. There is nothing new that comes from 3D printing. I've always been able to make a gun, I've always been able to go and buy a gun. Guns are still around, it's just that 3D printing expedites the process. So from 3D printing technology, there's nothing that you can really, to me at least, personally, I don't want to make up the audience's mind before they vote, but I would say, to me at least, there isn't really an argument you can make for why it would invalidate gun control, because gun control, at least here in Europe, I will say, works. In America, not so great. We'll leave that one as it is. But from my experience with gun control in Europe, it works. It's not stopped working, and it fits the purpose as though it was made for. In America, granted, your mileage may vary, but for us here, I would say that 3D printing, granted, has made firearms more accessible for more people, and yes, it has made the ability to create a firearm that it breaks laws that you wouldn't legally be allowed to have. For example, the FGC-9, which is semi-automatic in a centerfire cartridge, you wouldn't be allowed that here. But at the same time, over here, you wouldn't be allowed the bullets without a firearms license. So just having it doesn't really prove anything. I mean, I could have like a Browning 50 BMG on the ceiling, and I could have an MG42 on the floor. Neither of them would help me in any way here because I would still have to get the rounds for them. And there's only one way that you can get the rounds, and that is either to have them fall off the back of a military truck or to go to a firearms shop and they would ask to see your firearms certificate. And if you don't have that, then you just can't get the rounds for it. Unless, of course, your granddad came back from World War II with a few crates of ammo that fell off the back of a lorry. But outside of those very slim circumstances, for most people, you wouldn't be allowed it.
Isn't reloading something that you can do in UK or no? Like, can people manually load their own cases if they wanted to? Like, is there anything preventing you from buying powder or?
I'll tell you this: there is a really, really weird law here. If I wanted to make my own shotgun cartridges, I would need a shotgun license, a firearms license, and strangely, an explosives license. And I would have to be registered for all three. So I can reload, but that's going to be about like £500 just for the ability to start doing it. So most people don't really bother. I mean, I've got an explosives license, but that's literally one that I was given for one item. So for me, I have it, but it is literally one that I inherited something. So because the police couldn't really stop me taking it, I was given a one-time basically explosives license, which covers this one item that I can have, but I can't do anything else with it. It's literally just have this one item and that's it.
Yeah, and that's interesting to me because I think here in America, like, what would I do if there was no powder, there was no way to reload, and I would think about like how I would improvise my own, you know what I mean? Like I would be
Um,
improvising my own powder
well,
creation or
not
substitutes,
that
and
not that I would ever want to do it, and I highly stress to everybody that they never do this because it's highly illegal.
very very
You
high risk
should,
as well.
yes, you should never do it. It's very naughty. But fertilizer and rust from iron apparently makes a very good substitute. So I've heard from not very nice people who are all nasty, nasty criminals, and nobody should ever want to do what they do. Bad people, very bad.
Yeah,
But
so but that would be the point, right? Is that hey, people can go ahead and improvise a lot of this stuff out of the
yeah,
out of everything. And so if you're free to just improvise and create otherwise, um uh what is it like gun cotton or even just like access to something that oftentimes is less regulated or unregulated like or fairly unregulated I should say like black powder here in America. If you wanted to go buy $100 kit to make a black powder pistol, you could do that here in America. You could go into a sporting goods store and do that without a background check, right? The black powder itself, yeah, you could just buy it, so like if you're willing to do some workarounds and not just use things traditionally, and you needed to have
yeah.
firearms that for whatever purpose that function and work, it's like yeah, like
You
you
can.
know
There are workarounds to it.
absolutely. Um and
Strange actually. I know I shouldn't, but this is a fair debate, and I want to say it, so I will. Um, it does back up your point. In Louisiana, I think about 8 months ago, there was actually a robbery with an unlicensed flintlock musket. I shit ye not. Sorry, YouTube. I know I shouldn't say the naughty word. Susan will come and kick us all out. But there was a genuine robbery with, I think, a Baker pattern rifle from about 1751 in Louisiana 8 months ago. And the best bit
those
is you can look it up. It was recorded. There are two guys in balaclavas and caps walking in like it's 1781 with a Baker rifle and just have at it. It is hilarious. They don't
yeah,
even get the money. They just get told to get out because they were laughed out.
that happens more than you might think, actually. Like the
It
black
shocked
powder
me.
weapons, because they are. And by the way, you want to talk about another conversion that completely invalidates gun control. This is a little off topic from the debate, but
Yeah.
converting black powder like cap and ball revolvers, I believe,
Oh
converting them
yeah.
over into just converting the cylinders out in such a way that you can use normal, say like 44 Magnum ammunition
I
instead of
mean,
having to do the whole cap and ball loading. It's like
I've seen somebody do that in this country because even though we're not allowed pistols, if it works on black powder or it's before I think 1850, then oh yeah,
yep.
that's fine. You can do what you like with it. It literally takes you don't need a drill press or anything. You just take the cylinder out. A hand drill will do it. It's literally a 1-2 millimeter divot into the back of each cylinder, and you can literally make them run on almost any caliber from 9 millimeter up. I've seen one that was working on, I believe, 357 Magnum. I've seen one of those legal in the UK, which is very special because we don't see pistols very often.
Yeah, and that's and while this is off the site because now we're talking about like like metalwork and stuff. And if I if like I think you and I could agree that yeah, if everyone had like their own CNC and chemical etching machines and wanted
Yeah,
to make their own commercially viable firearm, and if people could manufacture their own powder
yeah.
and
Well, I mean,
primers
accuracy.
efficiently, then we'd have a different we'd have a different kind of
Yeah,
world.
I mean,
I,
Accuracy International was literally just three guys in a shed who made a really good
mm,
rifle. If we were just going to go on all the metallurgy, then yeah, we would be having a very different debate because I mean, let's face it, anybody with a drill press and a forge, it doesn't even need to be a hammer forge, can make a halfway decent commercially. Uh, I'm struggling for the word here, but something comparable to a commercial rifle. If
yeah,
you've got
well,
that, you can make
yeah, and
something of a similar quality. Is what I mean.
yeah, and like with AR-15s, that's something that people already do, where they'll get the
Yeah,
but the difference between that machine is that's $5,000, and like here in America, right? That's fairly inaccessible compared to you know a 3D printer that's going to run you somewhere between $200 to $1,000, right? And
yeah,
and so that's more or less just like my point here is that like yeah, I think we could say in Europe there's something different that gets Europeans in a place where culturally they're maybe they are more compliant, like let's grant that. There's something with the culture, and I would argue that if we had some similar policies on some other social issues in America, that we might be more compliant too.
Mm.
But it's just not our culture.
Yeah, I would
You
agree.
know,
A lot of
so,
things I've talked about, I have to use Europe as an example because as much as, I think that it could work, I know that it could work in Europe, but then you compare it to America and it's just like, no, it would not work in America. As much as I hate to say it, there are some things that it is so deeply ingrained in American culture that some things just will not work. It's like the entire reason for the Second Amendment, and something that I think a lot of people forget, actually, especially today, is the entire reason for the Second Amendment is so that if the United States military was overrun and somebody actually did invade the US by ground force, they would never be able to hold it because there would always be somebody with a gun that you don't know about around every single corner. It would be impossible to hold.
yeah, and I think I'd also tack on that like it's even therefore somewhat of a right to revolution. So like if the government was to be oppressive as well, like even if it doesn't in my view the way that I interpret it, I don't think that it's about just a foreign threat or just about
No,
a domestic threat.
no.
I think it's about the security, like the language
Yeah,
is necessary for the security of a free state. And so when I see that, I see like, oh well, that can be people running about like criminal organizations and gangs that are running about and trying to inflict their will upon innocent people. That can be the government. That can be if the military decided to violate. Oh God, like I mean, like the Third Amendment. I don't think we even get cases about our Third Amendment, but like the quartering stuff, right? You can't quarter troops in our homes, right? If the
yeah,
government was going to try to do stuff like that, right? And so I think people's Second Amendment right is kind of like right. The way that we see it is that it's there to defend other rights. Um, and it's there to protect the overall security of the state. And I think the more that you this may just be the impasse in the debate, but I think that the more that you democratize access to those tools for self-defense, I think the more difficult it is to limit those tools of self-defense from whoever you want, whether it's the good guys, the bad guys, whoever wants a gun gets to have it. You're making it, if you're accelerating the process, you're making it easier. And one thing I wanted to go back to, actually, I wanted to
yeah,
revisit before we call it, and then if you're going to move into closing, I'd say let's do that.
yeah. I'd
Um,
say after this.
yeah, so on the note of like who needs to get a gun so quickly that they can't do a 10-day waiting period. So like the examples of that are going to be like let's say someone's a domestic abuse victim, right? Like so the most
Yeah,
dangerous time for them is when they need to leave the house, right? And so if they're able to get a firearm quickly, whether that's 3D printed or something else, just notwithstanding, um, that means that they might be able to defend themselves from that abusive spouse. Let's say that there's like a restraining order or something like that that goes out. So they have a restraining order. Now that they have the restraining order, they apply for their carry permit because this person's demonstrated violence or violent tendencies to the court, and like they might be stalking this person, whatever. But the justice system is screwed. You can't just keep these guys in jail all the time. So a restraining order is going to be what you have to do.
yeah,
So in those cases, it's like, yeah, it would probably be nice to have that option to have something to defend yourself with, and to get told that, like, to tell like an abused woman or something like that, hey, you got to wait 10 days before you can defend
yeah.
yourself from your stalker, crazy ex-husband or whatever.
Mm,
Like that would be crazy, right? Like and so for that person in that situation, they're looking at the law and they're going like, why do I have to wait? Like this isn't some impulse thing for me, right?
mm,
So having that option to 3D print something, if like let's say they moved out, or to be able to borrow a friend's 3D printed something, right, or
yeah,
borrow a firearm from a friend, that's a really nice thing for those people to have when they have to deal with those restrictions. And that's also why I'm opposed to 10-day waiting periods.
yeah.
But
I will concede.
neither here nor there. But
I will actually concede that point because I think it is a very good one, where it's rare, but there are genuinely times when people need a firearm and they need it now. I'd say another example. I see. This is why I hate arguing topics that I agree with, but not to give on to Walt's point because I would never do that. But One thing I will say is Kenosha, especially, and the BLM riots in Minnesota, there was a huge surge for firearms then because people wanted to defend themselves. And I think it's especially situations like that, especially in the current climate where in America it can be one thing that happens in a city and suddenly the entire place is on fire. I think there is a big thing about that, and people wanting. Ironically, the people who are saying we don't need guns are pushing more people to get guns because they're so violently destructive. It's quite a spectacle. Anyway, if you want to move on to closing arguments.
Yeah, I'll let you get the last word in here. So as far as my argument, it's fairly straightforward, and it's just, hey, look, like, if you're going to make things more accessible, you're going to make things more easier to do, and those things are going to become more common over time, as is the case with 3D printing, then outcomes such as 3D printed firearms are going to be more likely. The reality is that these circumvent registration laws, they circumvent possession laws and what types of firearms you can possess. They allow you to transition existing firearms through into with something like an autoseer that you could 3D print, right? That would allow you to transition that into a machine gun effectively if you wanted to. And for the record, in America, registered autoseers are treated as their own separate firearm, which is just kind of interesting, but neither here nor there. Yeah. So as far as this goes, that's the long and short of the argument. While it is true, yeah, you could have made a firearm at home with pipes from Home Depot for all time. While you could have used these tools to do it, having something more ergonomic, having a machine that does a lot of the work for you, being able to follow simple schematics and everything online, and seeing how this stuff is democratized and improved over time, it's shared by the community over time. All of that stuff makes it more accessible and thus easier to do. And the easier it gets to do, the more people get to do it, and the more people that get to do it, the more gun control is going to be invalidated because of who's going to get access to 3D printers. We can't stop criminals from getting 3D printers any more than we can stop you from getting one. And so when we're looking at all this stuff at the end of the day, my opinion is, yeah, it provides yet another workaround for conventional gun control. It provides a way for people to get what they want beyond these ridiculous laws that we have here in America governing things like your grip or your stock versus an arm brace or whatever. It gives you workarounds for the law as it exists today, and no one will ever know if you put it on a firearm and if you broke the law with it. So just that's the long and short of the argument. And to the extent that I can cede anything to Charles here, I do agree with Charles that it doesn't invalidate every gun control measure, and that 3D printing wouldn't suddenly make guns appear in every single home worldwide tomorrow or anything like that. And I don't think either of us are arguing something like that, but I do think it's clear that it invalidates some gun control measures, a significant number of them. And if you agree with me, then I'd ask for you to vote on my side when we hit the debate poll. And I'll turn it over to Charles for the last word.
Well, I personally think that whilst 3D printing technology does enable a slightly quicker access to illegal firearms, and granted slightly less labor, I'm not going to say easy because it's not really as easy. I'd say they're about the same in level of skill required. But I believe that it makes it a lot less labor intensive, should we say, to make a firearm illegally. But one, people have always been able to do that, and as I've said throughout the debate, 3D printing hasn't actually enabled anybody to do anything new. 3D printing has simply allowed people, a slightly more expedient access to an illegal firearm, rather than just granting them access to it. Because as we've gone through, the Anarchist Cookbook's a thing that exists, and there are several other books that can literally run you through how to make a gun from things that you can go and get down at a local hardware store for literally about £10 or $15. On top of that, I think that there are a lot more dangerous firearms out there. For example, as we've mentioned, light machine guns, heavy machine guns, vehicle-mounted machine guns. All of those are fully automatic. They fire rifle to anti-materiel cartridges. They're a lot more powerful, and 3D printing has yet to actually reveal whether it could create anything that's even close to the level of power and danger that those things can create. So I don't think that it invalidates gun control measures against them. As I've said, expediency, things like that, doesn't really invalidate normal gun control. And on top of that, my final point, as I will say, is I really question who is actually going to be the one to create illegal firearms. You know, is it going to be criminals? Invariably, no, because they've already got a system to get firearms. As I've said, in London, there are gangs who already have firearms. They have hundreds of illegal weapons, but they rarely use them, so they aren't going to want them. The average citizen, as Walt said, outside of extreme circumstances, I don't believe that they would want one because, pardon me, if you're going to use it, then even if it's defending yourself and even if you're absolutely correct, then you are still breaking the law in some level. So you're not really going to want to use it. And I don't think that it invalidates normal gun control because normal guns still exist. So if you agree with me that 3D printing doesn't bring anything new to the table, it just brings an edge to the illegal gun scene, then please vote for me, because I think that gun control is still a necessary evil, unfortunately. Thank you to everyone.